Formula One opened its doors to prospective new entries for the 2010 season, the £40 million budget cap presented a considerably more affordable solution to the lower series racing teams looking to make the step up to the top table of international motorsport. It also opened F1 up to teams operating outside of the conventional motorsport valley. An approximately 30-mile radius around the Silverstone circuit, in which most UK-based teams have their headquarters, 2 entry applications came from Spain, with 2 Junior Series veteran outfits aiming to become F1's first ever Spanish constructor. Sure, there have been Spanish licensed teams on the entry list, largely courtesy of Emilio Di Vellotta's privateer exploits in the late 70s and 80s, but these had run customer chassis and hence didn't count as a full-fat bona fide constructor. Adrian Campos' eponymous team was one of the 2 and endured myriad problems itself, which we'll explore later in this series. But international rival Epsilon Euskadi had similar designs of making it to Formula One. Based in the Basque Country of Spain, Epsilon was a mainstay of the Formula Renault 3.5 series in its heyday, and took Robert Kubica to the 2005 title and enjoyed further victories with Davide Valsecchi, Felipe Albuquerque and Albert Costa within the series. The team was run by F1 veteran manager Joan Via-del-Prat, formerly of Benetton, McLaren and Ferrari. Via-del-Prat had started Epsilon Euskadi in 1999, and having proved to be more successful within the junior categories, the team began to gravitate towards becoming a more multifunctional company. Having expanded its operations to make room for a prototype program, Epsilon designed the EE1, its 2008 challenger, and entered 2 in that year's 24 Hours of Le Mans, although neither car made it to the finish. The EE2 promised to be a much better car, and Via-del-Prat brought ex-F1 designer Sergio Rinland to manage the project. Although Epsilon looked to get involved with other projects too, the gaze soon turned to Formula One, which became incredibly tempting with the budget cap on offer. The team then set to work on putting together a credible entry to make it to the field. Epsilon had put together a small but strong team in the Vitoria factory, which had its wind tunnel prepared by Fondmetal Technologies. Although the team had support from the Basque government, finding sponsors in Spain proved to be tricky, owing to the preceding financial crisis. Presumably, as was the case for the other teams aiming to come to the 2010 Formula One field, most of the capital would have to come from pay drivers. Via-del-Prat nonetheless felt that his team had enough budget to make it to the Formula One grid regardless. To prove its credibility to the FIA, Epsilon had geared up for its F1 project in earnest, in which Rinland was heavily involved in the design of the car. Developing a car that had made it all the way to the wind tunnel, the team was ultimately denied a chance to test its mettle, and like the ProDrive team before it, it came down to the choice of engine that Epsilon wanted to use. Rinland confirms that the FIA favoured the entries which had signalled an intent to use the Cosworth engines on offer. The FIA had invested some of its own resources into the engine company to reduce the 3-way stranglehold that the remaining manufacturers had on Formula One. Epsilon wanted to take the Renault engine, however. Via-del-Prat was good friends with then Renault boss Flavio Briatore, and had a handshake on a deal with the French manufacturer to take their V8 engines. But on the day that the team went to go and present its entry to the FIA, Via-del-Prat was told that he should probably amend the entry to include a Cosworth engine. Epsilon was adamant that the Renault power plant was the stronger one, and could have beaten the other new teams on the grid had it had a more powerful engine than the rest. By 2010, the engines on the grid had approached parity. A post-2007 engine freeze largely stopped the development of the V8 powertrains, although Renault was also given special dispensation to achieve parity with the Mercedes and Ferrari units. Meanwhile, Cosworth, which had been on an F1 hiatus as its Williams deal came to an end in 2006, based its CA 2010 engines based on that project. And while cheaper, they weren't quite on the level of power and fuel economy as its competitors. Regardless, Epsilon's decision to opt for a different manufacturer ended its chance of making the field, although it was placed on a reserve shortlist in case any of the other new teams failed to make the grade. But by the time 2 of the entries were facing ruin, it was too late for Epsilon to secure a place on the 2010 grid. Epsilon attempted once more to grace F1 with its presence in 2011. The FIA reopened its tender process to add a 13th team to the grid, in the wake of US F1's failure to make the 2010 field. An Epsilon bid against GP2 stalwarts ART Grand Prix, the Villeneuve-linked Durango project, Cypher Group, a US F1 Phoenix team, and the mysterious Stefan Grand Prix. But the FIA decided in its wisdom that none of them were good enough to make the grid, having presumably become more discerning under Jean Todt's stewardship after he took over from Max Mosley in the presidency. Epsilon and Via-del-Prat took one final stab at making the field and was linked to a merger with the struggling HRT squad, having had talks with owner Jose Ramon Carabante, who himself had taken over the team from Campos prior to the 2010 season. The HRT merger never came to light, however, and it seemed destined that Epsilon would never make it to the Formula One grid. By that time, the team had lost support from the Basque government and was hemorrhaging money. The team's death knell came courtesy of a corruption case in 2013 against Via del Prat, who had been accused of concealing assets during Epsilon's existence, which brought its racing exploits to a close altogether. Via del Prat was ultimately acquitted of those charges in 2016, but by then, the damage had long been done. Given HRT's state of affairs before it made it to F1 and the performance shortfall of the other teams, Epsilon does seem to have been better prepared. But the team's small size and choice of Renault engines ultimately counted against it. Arguably, of the more serious applications, Epsilon was one of the lower profile entities not to make it, but its appearance in the second wave of applications suggested it had plenty of ambition and desire. Epsilon's plans couldn't be realised, but where a small Spanish engineering firm failed, a large British engineering firm with plenty of experience on the F1 grid also failed to make the grade. But that's a story for next time.